For centuries, sub-Saharan Africa was home to prosperous empires. By the end of the 15th century, Europeans had begun arriving in the region, wanting to acquire resources such as gold, copper, and rubber. And slaves. Europeans enslaved and killed at least 20 million Africans between the 16th and mid-19th century. When the slave trade abated by 1870, a new era in sub-Saharan Africa began, the age of colonialism. By 1914, European powers controlled almost 90% of the continent, often through the use of unmitigated violence. 20th century sub-Saharan Africa also saw a wave of independence movements, sometimes bloody, sometimes peaceful, but almost always the result of a long and hard-fought battle with colonial powers. Independence brought radical new opportunities. But this new era of independence came just as the Cold War between the United States and the Soviet Union and their respective allies started heating up. Throughout the Cold War, both the United States and the Soviet Union tried to expand their influence in the region by providing military and economic aid to governments supportive of their respective worldview. In some cases, these world powers supported interventions or were involved in proxy wars in newly independent African countries to ensure that governments friendly to their agenda remained in power. Many of sub-Saharan Africa's borders date back to colonial times when boundaries were drawn without considering the people who would end up living on either side. After World War II, as countries gained independence, ethnic, linguistic, and religious groups within national borders started fighting for control. In 1964, many African governments formally agreed to maintain colonial borders in an effort to promote stability in the region. But this effort often failed. Just 3 years after this agreement, a bloody civil war broke out in Nigeria when an ethnic minority tried to secede and form the Republic of Biafra. Although the war ended in 2.5 years with the surrender of Biafran forces, Nigeria has lived in uneasy peace ever since. These tensions were not only for control for the locals, but outside powers which is hungry for the resources. African countries may seem to have political influence, but we all can speculate on the reality of it. Economic independence is yet to be fully gained from the outside forces and should stand on their ground. For decades, Africa has been teeming with foreign military personnel, with more than a dozen countries known to have deployments and bases on the continent. A key area of interest for foreign powers, particularly Western countries, has been the Horn of Africa. At least 13 countries have a military presence in Africa, while there were about 11 foreign military bases in the Horn of Africa, according to a 2019 report by the Institute of Security Studies, a think tank headquartered in South Africa. All of these can be broken down to control or gain natural resources, cheap materials like uranium, gold, diamonds mining, and strategic military positioning in geographical locations. The question is, how can Africa take control back and provide a hopeful future for its future generations? The situation of basic amenities in this country has improved when compared with the past, but certainly needed much more improvement. African countries should come up with good governments, should not be compromised by outside forces, eradication of corruption, good education. Healthcare infrastructure developments are deciding factors along with others. Hope, new researches and technological advances make lives better for people in Africa and around the world.